Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Harnke on behalf of the OER Committee on the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus that's in Aurora, Colorado. I would like to welcome you to our presentation. I would also like to thank the Colorado Department of Higher Education for the OER grant money it has provided us over the last couple of years, which has actually led to this presentation today. We want to look at various ways that faculty can track the use of their OER products. As part of the grant on the Anschutz campus, we have had the opportunity to fund various faculty, not only in adoption, but creation of OER. And we want to be sure that they know of various ways that they can get recognition for their work in the promotion and tenure process. So that's what we want to look at today. Please feel free to add questions to the chat, and we'll also have some time at the end for Q&A. Thank you.
All right, so this is Michael Lampy on behalf of the OER committee. Again, Ben does a fantastic job leading all of us. I'm one of the instructional designers that are part of the committee to help out, and we meet probably about weekly. We meet every month to try to figure out what are ways that we can help the faculty members out. And one of the things that we started looking at is in what ways can we reach our faculty members more so that they can get involved in the OER process. And we also started looking at, in what ways do faculty members view OER in the situation? And just to kind of clarify things before we kind of get started here is what is promotion and tenure? For those of you who might not be in the higher ed world or may be less familiar, essentially promotion and tenure is the faculty expectation to progress through the ranks and provide evidence of advancement and productivity. So in this particular presentation, we're going to talk about where promotion and tenure fits into the OER process based on some of the research and discussions we've had with some of the higher up administrators in academic departments. And then we're going to talk about, okay, how do you make OER analytics work in to your advantage for promotion and tenure situations to kind of get that process started. So before we begin, one of the things that we looked at before we started reaching out to people and we started notice through informal conversations that this is a possibility, we started looking up several different articles. Right now we're kind of in a very beginning stages here as far as gathering the research and the data for stuff like this. So if you are interested in expanding this research or having a conversation, we are open and willing to have these conversations, create a community of practice around this. One of the things that we noticed in the relationship, at least from the articles that we read, and these are just kind of two highlighted points that we saw, that 91% of the P&T policies surveyed in one article said that it didn't really specify specifically on OER in their promotion and tenure files. And only 2% actually viewed OER as positive. Now, I know that I'm speaking to the choir here that, we all think OER is beneficial to accessing information or easy access to information. But from a higher ed faculty perspective, how can we help change that, that conversation? In another survey that was done, they felt that 20.5 actually felt that OER was a factor in the PNT decisions. Again, that's very low given the circumstances. And there's a big chunk of faculty and administrators who haven't heard of OER before. So how do we take care of this process? How do we take care of the situation? We wanted to see in our own context, was that the case? So among our own committee members, we selected people that we knew that were higher up administrators, department chairs, associate or assistant deans, people to just kind of get their word on what they've done. And one of the things that we noticed was that there was still a clear understanding, there needed to be a clearer understanding of what OER was. And that that research, again, think of your own context, but for us, because we were a research medical campus, research was held at a higher regard than your typical, your teaching practices. Teaching is less, it's not that people don't think of it as a good thing to do. It's research was a very highly thing to do as far as promotion and tenure. That said, one of the caveats that we saw from the answers that we had was that OER is considered a creative and scholarly product. The thing that needs to get resolved is how do we take advantage of the non-traditional metrics, and how do we eventually convert these non-traditional metrics and make it more quote unquote traditional, make it more accepted in the field. I think if we had more of a critical mass people using these type of analytics to show or demonstrate the importance of their created OER in their field, would it be easier to make it as part of a tenure promotion and tenure process? So with that, we're going to dive into how to intentionally look at your places you put OER and utilize the analytics, the power of analytics that are going on in the places that you're putting your OER materials in. So without further ado, I'm passing it over to Ellie.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Ellie Svoboda, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some analytics, and more specifically, peer review. Where can you put your OER so that you know that it has some kind of peer review or user reviews? So on the next slide, we have InTech Open is an open access book publisher that we actually have been using quite a bit on our campus because we are a medical school campus. They have a lot of higher graduate level kind of biosciences work. And here you can see that their works all go through a fairly extensive peer review and editing process. So we know that traditional promotion and tenure involves a lot of that peer review is highly valued. So when trying to come up with these non-traditional things, slotting them into something traditional like peer review is really great. So if you were to publish anything through InTech Open, you could show your P&T committee the extensive peer review that your work went through. The next slide goes over OpenStax, which we all know that gets peer reviewed prior to publishing. So very thorough, good peer review. On the next slide, we have open textbook libraries, which they are not everything is peer reviewed within open textbook library. However, they are up to previously when I created these slides, I'd found that about 60% were peer reviewed, but I was in a session earlier today that said it's now closer to 80%. So there's a higher likelihood that your work will get peer reviewed in something like the open textbook library. The next slide, we have Merlot, which is a really common place to place OER. Merlot does not require peer review. However, they do have an editorial board that selects particular materials to be peer reviewed. So if yours gets selected, you will have a peer review. But there's also a mechanism for user reviews. So you can at least collect user reviews from other faculty or teachers who have implemented your OER materials. The next slide has OER Commons, which does not have a peer review necessarily, but it does have a user review option. And then this slide is about institutional repositories. So one mechanism that sometimes faculty use and that we're actually encouraging a lot of our faculty to do is to deposit their OER in their institutional repository. And many institutional repositories collect statistics such as views and downloads. So here you can see an example of a material in the Mountain Scholar repository, which is our institutional repository. And so this psychosocial paper has been downloaded 129 times and been viewed 192 times. The last thing on the next slide is that alt metrics, that you can also consider kind of diving into alt metrics, which is a growing field in the world of libraries of trying to measure impact in a non-traditional way. So things like views and downloads and social media mentions. So now Michael is going to talk some more about some other ways to collect metrics and data.
You're muted, Michael.
You're muted. Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. All right, round two. So the other thing that you need to, you can use to your advantage. So let's just say you might not have some of these more databases in your fingertips. Maybe some of you are posting on a Google site that's public, or you know, you're using Bitly. So we're gonna go, we're going more from the traditional library type databases that Ellie just talked about, and now let's kind of take a look at things that you might have in your toolbox in your institutions that you might not be aware of. So the first thing is, if you're outside of an institution, obviously Google Analytics is something that you can use. I know that they're kind of revamping their interface right now. So just so you know that it might not look necessarily like this, but if you want to know how many people are going into your website that has your OER content in it, it does provide pretty extensive information about where they're coming from, you know, how much time are they spending in the database of that as well. I do know that we just did a project with a medical faculty member where we're using Bitly we wanted to make sure we had a very clear and clean and easy way to determine how many times the students were clicking on the supplemental OER resources. So we created Bitly links for all the OER contents as this faculty member was using, and we were able to figure out how many times students were actually going to these supplemental resources, as is it something that we'd be able to do in the future. So definitely something to consider. And then let me just see here. Okay, another thing too, if you have a video that's OER, we use Text with Nomia at the CU Anschutz Medical Campus. I know some people use Panopto or things like that. Whichever lecture capture application your institution might use, you might want to see what kind of privacy settings you have, because if you have a privacy setting where it allows you to post publicly, you could still gather some baseline analytics of how many people are viewing your video materials. Obviously, YouTube is another way to do it as well, but just in case you want to utilize it for academic purposes and or use it where you're kind of publicly promoting it and doing a shameless plug on Twitter, you could do that in your lecture capture application materials. Also, take a look at doing a deeper dive in social media. Twitter, it's kind of hidden, but you can actually go into Twitter. Actually has a pretty extensive analytical engine to see how many times your tweet is getting out there and how many people are linking. So this is not necessarily an OER product from my Twitter account, but I knew how many people clicked on that link because we were promoting a job at the time. So think of that too. How many times are people sharing your tweet or clicking on your link in your social media, and how do you create that power in your promotion and tenure? Which brings me to Natalia, who's going to talk about how you could take these cool analytics and put it in your promotion and tenure and CV files.
Thank you, Mike. So the idea here to bring it all together is we, in our program, we're trying to promote adoption and creation of OER by our faculty for the benefit of our students. But that's not so easy to promote, right? We need incentives, and people are busy and they have a lot of obligations. So how do you incentivize the adoption of OER among faculty that wouldn't otherwise do it? And one of the main tools that we have in academia is recognition. And that's where the promotion and tenure process becomes so important. But for that to be recognized in this process, we need quantitative evidence of excellence in the products that you develop, right? And that's where all these analytics come in. And I know it's been a lot of information, but this session is being recorded, so you'll have access if you want to go back and look at each thing a little bit more slowly. So we're trying to cover a lot of ground, but going to the promotion and tenure part, some universities are starting to include language about OER in their guidelines. So for example, this is an excerpt from the University of British Columbia, and it explicitly says that evidence of educational leadership includes open education repositories and resources. But what happens if that language is not there? What can we do about that? We can still certainly include our OER products in our promotion and tenure portfolio. So can we go to the next slide, please? So for example, this is an example from our own University of Colorado Anschutz promotion criteria matrix. But similar matrices are available in most universities to decide what is considered meritorious or excellent. And most universities have a 3 or 4 prong mission, right? That includes, in our case, it includes, clinical service, but it also includes teaching, research, and other kind of service. And so even if in an institution like ours, research is considered the most important for some departments, and for some others it will be clinical, you still need to have at least meritorious outcomes in the other areas of your mission. So you have to provide evidence of excellence in teaching, even if it's not your main part. And for some institutions, it is the main part of the mission. So for example, here in teaching, sorry, can you go back? Thank you. It is considered meritorious. Some of the examples are the development of teaching materials and continuing education courses. I highlighted here also self-improvement activities, because part of our program has been developing all these faculty development workshops on OER, and that can be highlighted as something that you have done for self-improvement for your teaching mission. But the development or redevelopment of materials or courses is something that is highlighted as meritorious in this side, and as excellence in the right panel here. The development of innovative teaching methods and materials can also fit within that OER context, right? OER can be considered innovative, and faculty don't even have to create a whole new course, but just redesign it to incorporate OER would be considered an aspect of innovation. So can we move to the next? And then we not only have teaching, but also we have scholarship of teaching, which is considered separate in our matrix. And an improvement of a course fits within the meritorious aspect. But then the development of innovative, for example, here it says innovative syllabi, lectures, problem-based learning, other instruction and materials, OER can fit all those categories. So this is something that we really need to look into these matrices and highlight OER within each of these different aspects, so that it can really be considered, even if it wasn't explicit in the criteria, it can really be fit very nicely within the promotion matrix. So let's move to the next.
5 minutes, Natalia.
Yeah, so how that is within the tenure promotion matrix, but how do we include this in our CV? For teaching, it's a little bit more straightforward. So for example, if you're doing course development, you can put your usual description of your course, but then you can add qualitative modifiers like, I redesigned the course around open educational resources to decrease student costs, increase accessibility, improve the educational experience. This led to better grades, improved reported student satisfaction. So if you can get that kind of metrics throughout your course about student satisfaction, and then of course grades, then that's something that really speaks quantitatively to the impact of your OER and the innovative aspect of it, and teaching scholarship, right? Another example here, developed, and this is for, if it's not just a course redesign, but for example, a website that you developed, you can use the metrics that we were talking about and say explicit things like develop a unique educational resource website that, curates this or that. And it's available worldwide, and it's currently being used in this curriculum. And if you have additional metrics, like it has been accessed from, 20 different countries in 5 continents, though that's all very strong qualitative information that will do a lot for your promotion package. Can we go to the next? And then what is a little bit more tricky sometimes is research publications. How do you highlight that as a pro? But I will say that our federal research, our federal institutions that support research want journal articles to be available to the broad public. So nowadays, more and more people are publishing their articles in open journals, open access journals. And if not, at least they have to be made available open access after a certain period of time to comply with federal regulations. So more and more people are going towards this kind of system now. And I know it's not completely OER, but it's a step in the right direction. And then in the case of books, because we know peer review is very important for our qualitative and quantitative data, in the case of books, you can use the metrics that Ellie and Michael were talking about when you put your OER book in a repository where it can be accessed, not only accessed, but also the statistics can be retrieved from those repositories so that you can highlight that in your CV. For example, this book has been ranked 5 stars in both editor and user settings on ratings on Merlot, and clickable views reaching 500,000 within a year. You know, that's that's a great example from Michael.
Just a disclaimer. Disclaimer. This is very dubious. Don't look these things up.
Or, you know, this online book has been accessed 100,000 times from 22 countries. These are things that a lot of people don't include in their CV. They just put the raw data on what has been published, but these modifiers can make a whole big difference in your promotion or even in being hired in an institution, because you don't just show the same thing that everybody else is showing, you're actually showing metrics that go beyond that, right? It's not just the same to say I publish this book than to say I publish this book that is being used in 10 different countries and that has 500,000 views. So those are, you know, some of the little things that you can do to highlight OER in your CV and in your PNT that can really push forward and differentiate your materials from someone else's. So I think it's an important motivator for our faculty if they really understand how they can take advantage of it. Excellent. And with that, I think we're exactly on time for once. And it will be great to go to the takeaways and then take questions.
Well, no, we could take questions. I think we kind of set this up already. You know, essentially, what can you do to promote and educate people about the space? How can you strategize or intentional dissemination? And you know, if adopting analytics, provide feedback and reviews for others so that you pay it forward as well. It's pretty much. I think we hit those on the mark. So we'd be happy to take questions. Create more time for questions rather than doing the key takeaways.
There are questions in the chat and some of them were addressed by David. But there's also a question about the link. If you can share the link to your presentation. So if you can just paste it in the chat, that would be great.
Sure, let me stop my share so that I can do that really quick because we did use
Hey, Michael, while you do this, I'm going to jump in here. Regina, we're going to tag team this here a little bit. So one of the questions was from Anna. If we publish our OER textbook on multiple platforms, are there any widgets that can put it to track views across multiple platforms? I wanted to throw this into the entire OER group and see if anybody had any insight for that particular question.
That Anna, I don't think there is a metrics that will track across all of the platforms. It has, you know, my experience, it's individual. So if you're publishing it in Pressbooks or you're publishing it in a website that is institutionally owned, it tracks separately. So unfortunately, no, you just have to aggregate all the data from across all of the platforms that you're publishing. Hope it answers it.
I was going to chime in and echo what Regina said as well, is that it's got to do with how the platforms are built and the coding. So it's very hard to get cross-platform integration. And if you think about it, there isn't really any incentive for the developers of the individual platforms to do it, right? One idea that popped up, I don't know if anyone here is good with Google Analytics, but I believe Google Analytics can capture streams with just the URL. So if your resource is got a URL, you may be able to get some analysis that way. But I'm not a really very good at Google Analytics, so I'm not 100% sure about that. But my understanding about Google Analytics is all you need is the URL to capture the stream, and then it should be able to, regardless of what platform it's built on, it should be able to capture the data that's actually getting streamed through that domain. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
And excuse me, I really have to stop the recording because it's 6:59. Let me stop the recording first.